Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Welcome to the Malcolm Hoenlein Show. He's allowed me to join and take over the microphone. It's a pleasure, Malcolm. Good evening to you. Let me see. Where are we going to start, Malcolm? I understand there was a Rose Garden conversation today between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Turkey.
And it started raining on them.
And the President finally called in the Marines, Malcolm. This is seen as a strong indication that he's learning the lessons from Benghazi. Yes. And they were very handsome Marines. However, we go immediately to the subplots that we saw today on the dais. The Prime Minister of Turkey is a man who has been in conversation with the President of the United States many years. And this is a region where everything is connected. There's no such thing as that's not my business or that's another silo and I only deal with this silo. Everything's interchanged. So we'll go through what I heard briefly from the President's remarks and the Prime Minister's remarks because we'll check them off. First, we'll start with Syria. The President said Assad must go. The Prime Minister said Assad must go. However, I heard the word go much stronger from the Prime Minister speaking through the translator than I did from the President. And I also believe that I saw some separation between them tonight because the President is looking for the peace conference upcoming by the made available by the Russian agreement to join into the peace conference. And the Prime Minister is not, because that would include representatives from the Assad regime. And the implication is that the Assad regime would survive in some fashion during the transformation. Did I hear correctly that there's separation between them on this issue?
There is a division. There are a number of factors that come into play vis-a-vis Turkey viewing this situation very differently than the United States. Also, Turkey would like to see the United States intervene militarily, provide weaponry, administration.
No-fly zone.
No-fly zone, safe zone, whatever. But they do not want to see Assad participate in the talks. Assad today gave the list to the Russians of the people who would represent him in the peace talks. And it's the American expectation that Putin will deliver the Assad party to the talks between them and the rebels, and out of that would come an intermediate government. The United States has said they do not see Assad as part of that interim government, but it doesn't say that they will see him eliminated or cut out, or perhaps even that safe space that we've talked about of an Alawite region could be part of the final outcome. But he's looking at an internal situation that deteriorated a lot in the last few days. The bombings that took place inside Turkey a couple days ago, which took, I think, almost 50 lives, had a much greater ramification than anybody anticipated. Today, Syrians living in the area, the border area, where you have hundreds of thousands, do not show their faces in public. And the situation got so bad that Syrians are leaving Turkey back to Syria, to rebel-held areas of Syria, because it's become so dangerous for them in Turkey. And the resentment of the people, the feeling of the burden that this is.
There are 400,000 refugees in Turkey.
Exactly, and maybe more, actually. And so we're seeing Turkey having to look at this internal situation, the frustration, anger building up, and Erdogan facing an election who does not want to pay the price for it. So he comes to the president with all of this baggage now, and the president says to him, "Listen, let's work out a deal in Syria. We'll come together on it." And he says, "Well, are you prepared to intervene?" Then a video of rebel atrocities comes out, which shakes up Washington even more, although Cameron still says they're going to redouble their aid.
David Cameron, the Prime Minister
of Great Britain, yes, after his meeting with the president. So we don't see any uniform direction right now. By the way, another issue that they talked about was Iran, and Iran is a very big issue right now, for a growing issue for Istanbul.
Let me mention what I heard today from the president, who started the opening remarks, that the Prime Minister and I are together in knowing that Iran must not be allowed to have a nuclear weapons program. I heard the president adamant about that, but I did not entirely believe the nod that I heard from the Prime Minister. Is he committed to blocking Iran's ambitions for a nuclear weapon?
Increasingly, because he's seeing the threat to him, he's seeing the threats that have emerged, and the Sunni Shiite divide which is increasingly becoming apparent. We have talked about this.
The prime minister is Sunni, the Iranians are Shiite. Right.
But not only that, but they all have agents and all have sought to expand their influence. Erdogan trying to reestablish the Ottoman Empire, the Iranians the Persian Empire. These are not hypothetical. These are expressed goals. Erdogan has been trying to expand his influence in many countries. It has failed by and large, and his embassy to, as you called it, to Egypt at the time and to Libya and to other places, each time he got rejected. So he's looking back now at his own situation. He's the one who has a foot in Europe, being a member of NATO. That's why the president extols him all the time as a model. And increasingly, we're seeing the Islamization of Turkey, which nobody talks about. We're seeing new legislation, new efforts being made to impose Islamic rule, as is Erdogan's direction. And at the same time, he's facing increasing pressure coming from Iranian-backed forces, and the Sunni-Shiite divide is now running through every single conflict in the Middle East.
Malcolm, the Prime Minister's words today, the President's words brought the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's efforts to normalize relations with Israel, including an independent Palestinian state, that seemed especially cautious on the part of the President and maybe a little presumptuous, because my understanding of the history of the relations between the states is that they were excellent until the provocation of the so-called Gaza blockade runner in 2000.
Well, even earlier. It started with the election of Erdogan and his effort to build his standing in the Middle East, his insult to Paris at the Davos conference, and many other things that
However, the Gaza blockade was also part of the conversation today, because they talked about reparations to the people Israel's reparations, and the Prime Minister talked about going to Gaza. I even saw a late report that he might meet Mohammed Morsi there. That's still, to my reading, Malcolm, that is provocative conduct.
Very much so. And Morsi has always modeled himself on Erdogan, following the lead of going after the military, the press, trying to impose the Islamic rule, doing it more carefully, now slower than he was doing it initially. It took Erdogan years to impose it. Now you have all the hundreds of Turkish generals sitting in jail, those who are pro-West, those who continue the Ottoman and the Ataturk tradition. By the way, Kerry now, the president is not given up. Kerry is going back to the Middle East, his fourth visit to Israel, in an effort to continue that track. But right now, there's no expectation that anything is going to come of it. And secondly, there's nobody in the Arab world or the Muslim world right now that's talking about the Palestinian issue. They're so overwhelmed by these other things. This is a throwaway line. What is interesting is that the Comoros Islands went to the International Criminal Court over the last day to file a complaint against Israel, charging them with war crimes, because Comoros is a member, but represented by a Turkish law firm, to file charges about the Mavi Marmara, which Turkey had said it would not do.
This is the blockade runner of 3 years ago.
And Turkey said it would not do, and it was part of the understanding of the negotiations for reparations, and Israel and they are negotiating.
That's lawfare, Malcolm. That's
huge amounts of money. I mean, way beyond anything anybody has ever paid. Turkey is demanding for the families of victims.
And that's what the Prime Minister referenced today.
And that's exactly.
All right. And was that a surprise that he used that in the Rose Garden?
That was, I think it caught them off guard that they were going to make this initiative, and the fact that they can lay it off on the Comoros Islands. Everybody knows Comoros did not do it on its own. It was only done at the behest of the Turks.
And one more detail about the conversation today and the Prime Minister. What I'm looking at here is that he's got a political problem along his border, and he doesn't have an indefinite period of time to solve it. I'm understanding that his popularity is not bubbling up anymore, right. In addition to the fact it's very expensive to maintain the military. This terror threat, I understand, is not profound, but it's bad headlines. Does that mean that this upcoming peace conference, that the Prime Minister has a weak hand? Does he go into this peace conference weakened by these events?
Well, he certainly has been put in a different position, and he is also weakened in terms of what he can agree to, given the domestic atmosphere and the international situation. So I think, frankly, everybody goes into this situation with a weakened hand. I don't see really anything that can come out of it, because I don't believe that the rebels who are divided into 100 different groups are going to be able to unify and come up with a common stance. I don't think that Assad is going to agree to be knocked out of the equation. I don't think the Russians are going to allow that to happen and see a situation where all of their investment gets thrown away. The same with Iran. So it's very complicated, and nobody goes in with a strong hand.
Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations, is here with me. And ahead, we're going to talk about Iran and Syria. And this headline from the New York Times right now: Russia has shipped an advanced anti-ship cruise missile to Syria, a move that illustrates the depth of its support for the Syrian government led by President Assad, according to American officials within these last hours. So the peace conference already is extremely well armed with a top-flight anti-ship missile. I'm John Batchelor.